Hey everyone, Mrhappy here, and welcome back to our Final Fantasy XIV Retrospective series. For the moment, we're looking at jobs and how they were way back in A Realm Reborn. We've gone through a tank and a couple of DPS at this point, so let's shift gears and check out the game's OG healer in that of White Mage. Now technically it's the OG because it was around in 1.0 before we had Scholar, but of course it does share that initial A Realm Reborn spot with Scholar, but I'm still going to give it the title of OG. We're going to be checking out how the job and the healing role as a whole have evolved since A Realm Reborn by, well, looking at every skill the job has had. And let me tell you, there's a lot of skills you probably didn't know existed, especially with this one. So without further ado, let's get to it. Okay, I lied a little bit. I do want to shout out the tool we're using to do this. We're looking at really old versions of websites, and just like with the other Retrospective series videos, we are using the Wayback Machine. I can just simply drop a link into it and check all the times it's been updated and archived on the internet over the years. And with that, I can pull up the skill lists of these jobs from way before. Now, if you want to support the Wayback Machine, they do accept donations to keep running independently to fight misinformation on the internet. I'm using it for kind of a silly thing here, but hey, if you learn about it, then I guess it's good in that regard. So now we can get to the skills for White Mage. Alright, so like I said in the previous videos, we are going to be starting with A Realm Reborn here, as just looking back at 1.0 stuff is not only difficult to do because of the way the information is archived, but it just hurts my heart to even have to talk about it. Besides, A Realm Reborn is really what we're celebrating. It's almost 10 years of A Realm Reborn, and hey, we're coming up on that, so we get to celebrate it with more retrospective stuff. Now, in order to go back and look at White Mage in A Realm Reborn, we kind of have to do a few things. For one, we need to look at White Mage at multiple parts in each expansion, at the beginning of the expansion and at the end of the expansion. I learned that from doing my last video with the Warrior series, that a lot of people really liked seeing the transformation even within the expansion itself. So we have a lot of tabs open and a lot of skills to look at. And right now we are looking at 2.0 Conjurer. Now, Conjurer and White Mage had their skills separated on these websites way back when, and so that's just how we have to do it. The funny thing about White Mage is it required Arcanist at level 15 in order to unlock. Yeah, that was back in the days when we needed 2 jobs to unlock 1. Wasn't something a lot of people liked, because realistically, even those 2 jobs very often were not enough in order to play the job effectively. Now, looking at the skills, a lot of this is going to be familiar. Stone, Cure, Arrow. But not too far in, we see probably the skill a lot of people clicked this video to hear about, or at least to remember, in that of Cleric Stance. One of the most divisive abilities Final Fantasy XIV has ever had. Essentially, it was a DPS stance for healers. As it says with the description, swaps current intelligence and mind attribute ratings while increasing the potency of attack spells by 10% and reducing potency of healing spells by 20%. Effect ends upon reuse. So basically, your heals are way worse in Cleric Stance, but your damage is a lot higher. And the idea behind this was that whenever you didn't need to do a lot of healing, you would go into Cleric Stance to pump out more damage. At the very least, throw dots on the target so that they're dealing more damage than they otherwise would. But what it led to, much like with the tanks in their tank and offensive stance, this led to a divide in healers who were playing the game in 2 completely different ways. A lot of people go to play healer, they want to play healer. That's still true to this day. And Cleric Stance made it so that there was a clear divide between players who were playing just the healer role and people who were playing Final Fantasy XIV at a high level. And since it was easy to identify, a lot of people were attacked for not using Cleric Stance. And on the flip side, people were attacked for using it, even if they were using it in a manner that was effective and not misusing it and allowing people to die. It has just been one of the most argued about things, and you'll very often nowadays hear healers, White Mage is not excluded, because well, that's actually a cross-class action. So while it's a conjurer skill, you know, Scholar would be using it as well. It was just so many fights and people still arguing to have it back and that we should really have it nowadays to add complexity back to the job. Realistically, it was an extra button you pressed, and if you pressed it at the wrong time, it would just murder people. Though there are some caveats to that, and that'll especially be important when we go to talk about Scholar. Now, another thing we had back then was Protect. This would increase the physical defense of all party members within range, and I believe there's a trait that makes it also reduce magical damage around the 40 range. We'll see when we scroll down. This was basically, if you didn't have this, you just got destroyed by AoEs, tank busters, whatever. You just took more damage. This really felt like something that, you know, they did it in 1.0, and they did it in 1.0 because they did it in Final Fantasy 11, and it was just a remnant of it that never made sense. You would lose it if you died, and then if you died, you needed to be rezzed. Back then, you had less health, you did less damage, and without Protect, there was a good chance you just died. And even with Protect, there was a good chance you just died to the next room-wide AoE. It was a very different time back then. So that's another skill that's been long gone. We saw it in PvP briefly, and I don't think it's there now. I think we have all the current skills in PvP. But yeah, that's a fun one to remember. Medica, same. Raise, same. That stuff hasn't really changed other than potencies. Then we get to Fluid Aura. Now, Fluid Aura is also joining a category of skills from way back when. That was just the free off global damage. Fluid Aura was off damage, water, potency of 150, but it also applied a knockback and a bind. Now, this did have some effective uses both in soloing and in certain encounters in the early portion of the game. But realistically, it just became something you wanted to use off global on a boss just for the extra damage. So if you weren't using it, it was just free damage that was gone. I liked it, even though there was the issue where people would use it on enemies and bosses in the early game that were not immune to the knockback. So you'd get like bosses being knocked around in early level dungeons, being bound, and it was super griefy. It was something that was at least a little more involved. It was another OGCD to manage, and is another thing that you'll often hear cleric stance healers argue would be okay to come back. Esuna is still the same, Stone 2 the same, Repose, a skill that I think a lot of people are surprised is still in the game. I gotta say, a lot of people give Repose a bad rap. Is it useful in most serious endgame raiding? No, it does have a few things that you can use it for, though, that are nice. I know that Baldessian Arsenal runners in Eureka are very appreciative of it, and Deep Dungeon runners are, of course, also very appreciative. I believe now it is a role action, because I think all the healers can use it, but it originally started as a Conjurer skill, and, you know, it was pretty useful, just only in very select circumstances. Then you have Cure 2. I'm not going to lie, looking back at Cure 1 and Cure 2, and I don't want to say this too much throughout the video, but those skills really need, like, all of the healers need, like, an update to those kind of skills. Cure 1 is considered, like, if you use it nowadays, it's like, why? Like, you've screwed up if you're using Cure 1. Like, something's gone horribly wrong or you're playing wrong. Cure 2 isn't that far off that same vibe. Back then, Cure 1 and Cure 2 were a bit more interchangeable. You know, we didn't understand the game as well. There were less tools in the game. So it was, like, okay back then. But nowadays, it's like, if you have to Cure 2 again, something's gone horribly wrong. So I wonder if they'll ever go back and adjust that. Now, not to mention Cure 1, I think, gets the trait for free Cure in the mid 40s, but Cure 2 also has that 15% chance the next Cure 3 will restore critical HP, basically make it a crit. Such a weird thing, your Cure 2, your single target heal, occasionally making your AoE heal crit. That was also not seen very often, and we'll talk about that when we get down to Cure 3. Stone Skin. This is another skill that people sometimes argue we should get back. It was just an HP barrier, 10% of your max HP for 30 minutes. But it was broken by, you know, the same amount of things. Like, as soon as the barrier was broken, it didn't persist for the remaining time or anything like that. But it was just something that originally we had to one by one cast on every party member. People made macros for that just to start the fight with Stone Skin. And if you wanted to barrier someone as a white mage, you know, do that high level play like, ooh, the tank buster's coming. Let me time a Stone Skin for the tank buster. Yeah, those are times back then. I was a huge advocate for the time Stone Skin, especially on Titan whenever he would go to do a mountain buster. So I remember very, very well. For the pre-pull Stone Skin, somewhere in this video, we'll get to the point where we had Stone Skin 2, was a full party Stone Skin in a single cast, but could only be used outside of combat. And then, you know, Stone Skin's dead now. Now we have Benison for White Mage, which you'll see again later in the video. Shroud of Saints. Now, this is what we have now. It's called Lucid, I believe it's called Lucid Dreaming now. I barely even remember, but we'll see it again later in this video. This was the original version of it, but it also reduced enmity by half. And enmity management was very, very important back then, especially once we got to the point where tank stance was a bit less common because people are trying to pump more damage. This was a very, very important tool, especially if, you know, a new enemy had just appeared and there was a big healing requirement. Then making sure you had had Shroud of Saints became even more important. But it was also your refresh, your MP regeneration for 15 seconds, only 5 ticks. So you needed it for both things. It became a little bit difficult to use, but again, it was a decision that had to be made, you know, carefully, given that you only had one every 3 minutes. Then we get down to Cure 3. Still pretty much the same. However, its range was abysmal. It says 4. I thought it was 3. But essentially, it was like this tiny, tiny circle around the white mage. Your conjurer, you had to be right on top of them in order for it to do anything. Also, am I bugging? Or is the Cure 2 picture... the Cure 3 picture and the Cure 3 picture is the Cure 2 picture. Were they like that back then? And they switched them at some point? Because I just realized it's bugging me out right now. I got to log in and look at some point. Either way, yeah, so you had to stand right on top. And it was considered not very MP effective at the same time. You know, it restored 550, but it had a pretty big cost. I don't think the cost is represented here, but I remember it having a fairly large cost. So most people would just use Medica 2, wait for the dot to tick people up, and then maybe Medica, unless the party could be guaranteed stacked on top, and then you would see it a lot more. Once it got its range buffed, obviously we have it now. Cure 3 is an amazing tool nowadays for healing through really intensive stuff, but not so much back when 2.0 first released. Then we have Arrow 2, you know, way back when White Mages had 2 dots. And I know some of you are waiting for what I'm going to say about the Heavensward Arrow White Mage. But yeah, this was just another dot that you could cast. I believe were both of them instant, or was one of them a cast time? Arrow 1 was cast. Arrow 2 had a cast time. Yeah, Arrow 2 and eventually Arrow 3 had cast time. So yeah, that's just part of your damage management. Just another tool to, you know, make sure that you were hurting things. And Medica 2, still pretty much the same, just its potency and its effectiveness has been moved around over the years. You know, it's had some times where it's not super MP efficient, where it's not, you know, the greatest thing in the world, but it is what it is. For traits, most of these are, yeah, so at level 16, you got the shell effect. I thought it was in like the 40s. No, at like level 16, you get the magic defense effect to protect. Yeah, Granite Skin was Stone Skin going up to 18%. Ooh, here's the free Cure proc from Cure 1 to Cure 2. And then you had... you couldn't cast Raise in Battle till 28? What level did you get it? Wait, at 12? Really? I forgot about that. Yeah, you couldn't effectively combat raise till 28. Man, honestly, I'm starting to remember some of this stuff. This made Shroud of Saints a little bit stronger, and then Overcure was the Cure 2 to Cure 3. Weird how some of the actions above have the full-on effect. Dude, my light has just been randomly turning on and off. That's why I didn't bother with the green screen, because I was like, you know what? I don't know what's going on. But sometimes my lights just... they just don't want to stay on. They just turn off randomly. See, now my lighting's all good. Now we get to move on to White Mage, and we get to see the actual job actions. And these are all, not all of them, but 4 of them are pretty much completely identical to how they were, at least in concept. Presence of Mind increased the casting speed of spells for 10 seconds on a 5-minute cool. Why was that 5 minutes? Some abilities that were 5 minutes. Imagine if your 2-minute window was a 5-minute window nowadays. Oh, you know, I bet there's some people who might like that, but please no, please don't ever do that. It only lasted 10 seconds. I can't wait to see this at the end of A Realm Reborn, because I'm having fun with this. But Presence of Mind still works the same nowadays. It's just way better. Regen pretty much hasn't changed over the years. Now, Divine Seal is something that undergoes a few changes throughout the various expansions. Increase your healing magic potency by 30% for 15 seconds every 60 seconds. It was a great cooldown. Like, we didn't really know how to play the game as well back then, but Divine Seal... whew, it's a 25% uptime on your healing as long as you need it, and 30% is a lot of healing potency. So yeah, that was a great ability for them. Holy, as good as it's ever been. AoE, stun, damage. Like, yeah, it's gotten like damage fall off and stuff over the years, but like still, Holy is Holy, and it always has been. And Benediction, great. One interesting fact about Benediction. So I mentioned how Cleric Stance would reduce the effectiveness of healing, but that was only with skills that had healing potencies. Benediction was just a percentage health heal. 100% of your max health is a heal. So it completely bypassed the Cleric Stance stuff. So what you'd often see in dungeons is a White Mage Cleric stancing, doing as many holies as they can. And holy's good too. It's still to this day, it's an AoE stun, which is preventing your tank from taking damage, which made its synergy with Cleric stance even better, because you could stay in it longer. But if Benediction was off cooldown only once every 5 minutes, but still, you know, in a dungeon, you got a few of them off, of course, then, you know, you could essentially use it as an excuse to stay in Cleric stance a bit longer. You know, tank gets a little low, you know, like 15, 20%, pop a Benediction on them, boom, you're good to go. You can do that every few pulls. And yeah, it was just a more proactive way of using Benediction. And I think that's something that still to this day people struggle with. Benediction is really a proactive skill. You shouldn't be waiting to use it as a panic button. You should be planning to use it with the ability to use it as a panic button, but then you have to know how to adjust to where you were using Benediction in the first place. Now, looking at their cross-class actions, Ruin, you would never use. Same with Physic. You know, the Arcanist skills weren't super good. Virus was, if memory serves, I mean, I guess I could just click it, but it takes the Wayback Machine quite some time to load this. It was essentially what Addle is nowadays. You would just reduce the magic damage that things dealt. I think the thing I'm trying to remember is if it was magic or physical. Maybe I should just grab the thumbnail and put it over the video. But yeah, it was raid mitt, essentially. And so you would always alternate between viruses. The big thing is that enemies, I don't remember if it was right in 2.0, but enemies, when you virus them, they would actually get an immunity to virus for a set period of time. So you could not just rotate virus forever. That was their counterattack to having so many, because both the healers could take it, and then if you had a caster in the party, they would have it, you know, so that was just trying to make it a little weaker. Speaking of mitigation, really cool old mitt that we used to have, Eye for an Eye from Arcanist. Basically, it would put an ability on a target, a single target, and when that target was hit, it could proc damage reduction, or it would proc a minus damage dealt on enemies. So like, let's say a boss is hitting you and you have Eye for an Eye, it hits you and procs Eye for an Eye, now that boss will deal, you know, 10% less damage for 10, 15 seconds, whatever it was. The only thing is it wasn't guaranteed. You know, a lot of the times it would proc. It was very rare you didn't get it to proc. And in dungeons, you know, it's great just being able to throw it on the tank and reduce the damage everything's dealing. But the lack of 100% consistency, or at least I think it didn't have 100% consistency. Man, we haven't had it in so long. I feel like I'm trying to dig into the reaches of the back of my brain to remember this one. Yeah, it was a weird way, because it didn't have any effect if it didn't proc. Like, it did nothing at all if you didn't proc it. So it was that weird spot. Then we have Thunder. Thunder, this is something I think that went away in 2.1. Both Scholar and I think Scholar, Summoner, and White Mage could all take Thunder as a cross-class skill, and a lot of them would use it. I mean, it was just damage over time. They didn't care that they didn't have any synergy with the Thaumaturge or Black Mage skills. They just used it because it was a dot. And Summoner in particular could extend the dots back then. You know, they could take a dot, apply it. Now they don't even have dots, and then they could extend it. We'll talk about that in the Summoner episode, but yeah, that's Thunder. Thunder's a classic. And then Surecast and Swiftcast. Tried and true. Surecast was Garbo back then, though. I think Surecast might have had the knockback resist still, but up until, I think even into Stormblood, I guess we'll find out later, even into Stormblood, if you cast any spell at all, I think Surecast wore off. So it was not great to use, since it only worked on your very next cast. But your options here weren't very good anyway. So you took Virus, Eye for an Eye, Thunder, Surecast, and Swiftcast, until they got rid of Thunder, and then I think you took Physic. I don't think it mattered at that point. You didn't even care. But yeah, that's the start of A Realm Reborn for White Mage. Now let's see if anything drastic actually changed going through Conjurer and stuff. Oh man, you know, I forgot to even mention that Stone had Heavy. This was something that wasn't new. This was something that was, you know, still set in stone at that point. I didn't do that on purpose, I swear. But then, yeah, Cleric Stance, Arrow, Protect, most of this stuff all the same. Stoneskin 2, here it is. I don't think that's what it looked like on the hotbar. Yeah, Stoneskin 2 creates a barrier around self and all party members, cannot be used while in combat, or the target is engaged in combat. Yeah, so that was added by the end of A Realm Reborn. I didn't even think it took till the very end. I think it was in like 2.2 or 2.3. I don't think it was in 2.1, but I think it was in 2.2 or 2.3. Other than that, these are really just potency adjustments, if any adjustment at all. And for the traits, I think it's pretty much the same thing. Yeah, there's nothing really of importance here. Cross-class actions we don't really care about because we need to get to White Mage. And I don't think anything changes about White Mage. Oh, this lasts for 15 seconds with a 2.5 minute cooldown. That's a significant change. Benediction's still a 5-minute cooldown, but that's a big one. Oh man, I forgot Holy had a 3-second cast time and invoked a 3.5-second GCD. I forgot about that. Wow. Okay. Yeah, so that's something. I didn't see if that was a change. I think it always had that in the other one too. Yeah, it's just, yeah, I just didn't see it the last time. Yeah, okay. Wow. But yeah, other than that, yeah, everything. Oh, they got Blizzard 2 instead. If I recall, I think Scholar used Blizzard 2. I think there were situations where you Blizzard 2. I don't think you did it on White Mage because you had Holy. Maybe it was less MP intensive too. It might have been like a low MP AoE option. I forgot that that's what ended up replacing Thunder. I have a hilarious story about that, but it's I'll save it for the Black Mage video since it is the Thaumaturge skill and it does involve a Black Mage. Anyway, that is White Mage for a Realm Reborn. As you can see, a lot of similar things, but conceptually very different. The things that you were expected to do were a little bit more on a line. You know, like I said, there was that divide with Cleric stance. But here's the thing. In a Realm Reborn, that divide wasn't that big yet. It was sometimes in dungeons and maybe in like really easy stuff, but it wasn't that big yet. But Heavensward, that's why it is the way it is now. So let's move on to that. All right, so a couple things we're doing different in this video. I don't know why I said a couple things. It's only one thing. Is I'm actually going to do the start and end of every expansion. I mentioned that earlier. So Heavensward, unlike the previous video, we are going to have both of those. And I think that I don't remember if a lot changed, so this is going to be a fun little revisit. So going into Heavensward, most of the changes happened between levels 50 and 60. This is true for most jobs, and a lot of the earlier skills didn't really get changed that much. Maybe a potency here or there, but I mean, you can see all of this is pretty much identical. I think, I got to, hold on, let me actually go check something about Esuna that I didn't remember reading back then. No, it still had the 20% chance the next Esuna will cost no MP. Whoop-de-doo for that one, I suppose. Hey, sometimes it was helpful. Yeah, still Repose, still Cure 2, Stone Skin 2, everything. I mean, for Conjurer, it only goes up to level 50 anyway. But you can see that not really much has changed here at all. Going into the traits, again, they just didn't really adjust. The big thing is here is shortening Stone Skin's base cast time to 2.5 seconds. I forget what it was. It looks like it's 3 seconds here at base. Was it 3 seconds at base before as well? Yes, it was 3 seconds at base. So that's a change. It used to be Stone Skin was an 18% shield, which, again, whoop-de-doo. Also, this granted 20% chance that Medica will cost half MP. That also wasn't there before, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, no, because, yeah, so the big thing is they changed this. Pro Shell was just baked into Protect at this point, so there was no trait for it. So now they replaced it with another trait at level 16. Yeah, that's the first thing they did. Other than that, though, again, these are largely similar, so we can just move on to White Mage itself. This is a bit more defined, the 20% for 15 seconds, still the 2.5. You know, Regen, Divine Seal, still great. Holy, this is where they started doing damage reduction on it, and we start seeing PvP stuff kind of filtered into that point. Even worded differently. You know, the first target is hit with 200 potency. All targets afterwards take 10%, up to a maximum of 50% reduced. People were not a big fan of that back then. People are more used to it now, but back then, people were not a big fan of it. Now, I don't know why the thumbnails are missing, but we do have the new Heavensward skills. First of all, Asylum, still the way it is now. Now the Asylum is bigger, and now the Asylum has more effects to it. Back then, it was literally just you put down an Asylum and people healed over time, and that was it. Wasn't bad, but still compared to Sacred Soil, wasn't that valued. It was just something you would generally like Asylum and Medica 2 and just let the hots tick people up, or Asylum with a size and just, again, let the Asylum hot tick people up. That's still something you should be looking to do now if you're looking to get into healing. Don't look to like constantly GCD heal to top people up. Let healing over time do its trick. You know, let instant OGCDs do the trick instead of just standing there and hard casting. They got another, you know, upgrade to Stone with Stone 3. They got a size, which is still pretty much identical to the way it is today. Damage, healing, restores MP. It's been a great skill, and there's a reason why it's remained almost completely unchanged over the years. And then they got a third dot in that of Arrow 3. It's an AoE dot now, and this is a skill a lot of White Mages will tell you they miss. Great in dungeons. It was just another thing to work on. Had a long cast time, but was quite effective Retrospective to go out of your way to cast. So now white mages were maintaining Arrow 3, Arrow 2, Arrow 1. They had a size, you know, for dungeons. They had Holy. So they were pumping. White mages were pumping with Cleric stance on back then. And then Tetra, which is still just an OGCD, you know, instant heal. Still is that now. And, you know, it's okay, but, you know, no one's writing home about Tetragrammaton. And then for, you know, cross-class actions, still pretty much identical. And the PvP actions we're not going in too much for this video, especially because that era of PvP, I don't know that we want to revisit that. Now let's check the end of Heavensward, because I don't remember really what changed, if anything at all. I can tell you what, the structure of the website changed, because it's way clearer now. All of the things like the damage over time effect and all that stuff. Like, look at this. Knockback, bind. Oh, Fluid Aura doesn't deal damage. This is after that happened. Wait, did this happen at the start? No, this happened in the middle of Heavensward. That's when they got rid of... So, at some point in Heavensward is when they got rid of, you know, OGCDs having that that damage element. If they had like a knockback or if they had a stun or something like that, they removed that in the middle of the expansion. Really, I thought they removed it in Stormblood. Okay, good thing we did this, because that adds a tiny addendum to the previous video, but still a-okay. Arrow 2, Medica 2, nothing else. Anything change with the... Where's the trait? Oh, I went right past the traits. Oh my goodness, like half the traits were cold. This is way... Huh? This is way different. Upgrades Arrow to Arrow 2. Oh, they brought them back down to 2. Wait, that happened in Heavensward? They brought them down to 2 dots in the middle? I don't remember that. Oh man, I'm getting all sorts of lessons here. So many things are gone here. Wait, is Stone Skin down to... Stone Skin's gone! I'm losing my mind here. I didn't even realize. Like, I was like, wait a minute. There's no Stone Skin or Stone Skin 2. Yeah, so as you can see in the middle of Heavensward, there's a lot of changes. That's not that surprising. Patch 3.4 introduced the Creator tier. And the Creator tier was kind of like the beginning of the kind of raid philosophy we have nowadays. It's not one-to-one, but it's the start of it. And so you can see that some of these changes that are more representative of today's jobs were already happening in the middle of the expansion. So that's actually it's a pretty good history lesson, just to see all the traits culled and some of those like clunkier or slower abilities. But that does mean no more stone skinning tank busters. You will look so cool when you did it. As for White Mage itself, let's see if we've got anything of note here. No, Holy, still pretty much the same. Everything looking the same. Now we have the images for this right here. You know, Stone 3, a size, Arrow 3. You know, there's nothing fancy to say about any of this. Just all pretty straightforward. So at this point, White Mage pretty much sticking with a similar identity, but there's something I've neglected talking about with Heavensward White Mage, in that Heavensward as an expansion struggled with adding a third healer and a third tank. Dark Knight Warrior pretty much dominated the whole expansion because Paladin had some severe downsides, and Astrologian back then could choose between being a regen or pure healer or being a shield healer. Now, Nocturnal Astro, I mean, for a while it was a joke, but eventually it became a pretty big mainstay of the job. That being said, Scholar Astro pretty much dominated the whole expansion. Not like these tools were bad. I knew plenty of people who played White Mage in really serious endgame content and did phenomenally. There were world first clears in this expansion with White Mage, despite the notion that it wasn't good enough. But that's only because Astro was dog at the start of Heavensward, and by the middle to the end of it became the god tier option. Dark Knight, not so much the story. They were pretty much loved right out the gate once people got past the bad Dark Knights dying a lot in Brayflock's long stop. So White Mage struggled here. You know, yeah, they had a lot of personal damage tools. Yeah, they had some pretty nifty things, and they're things that people still enjoy about the job to this day. But it struggled with this whole pure healer thing. It just wasn't what people wanted. It wasn't what people were focusing on anymore. And it just wasn't the first option people were taking. So it was really important that they addressed this going into Stormblood, because Astro just couldn't keep dominating. And, well, I'm going to go through the skills, but if I remember correctly, they didn't hit the nail on the head with that one, I don't think. All right, now that we're into Stormblood, we can shift over to using the job guide, the official Final Fantasy XIV site. This one is from July 4th, 2017. If memory serves, that's like barely a week after Stormblood came out. So this is a very early look at White Mage. And I got to admit, I didn't really mention it before, but White Mage has really struggled at the start of expansions. They always get something that's like gimmicky and new, and nobody likes it. It always needs to be changed. We've seen some of those changes come in before it even releases, like mass changes based on like general perception and feedback. But we also do get a pretty good list of changes from the end of Heavensward to the start of Stormblood, because we have these patch 4.0 adjustments on the right. Stone had its heavy removed. Cure was now exclusive to Conjurer and White Mage. This is when they stopped doing cross-class and started doing role actions. Then we have, of course, the actual changes to its effect. We also have the effect 50% chance of restoring HP yourself to a party member while in combat. We'll add a Lily to your healing gauge. Oh boy, do I look forward to talking about that. Arrow, now exclusive to Conjurer White Mage, damage over time. Medica no longer has that MP cost reduction potential effect. Raise now exclusive to Conjurer and White Mage. Fluid Aura no longer deals water damage. Weird, maybe the... because now it makes me question. We had the Heavensward skills on the console wiki, and that was from a date before Stormblood released. But I wonder if some of those skills were representative of these changes, because this apparently didn't happen until 4.0. Interesting. Stone 2. So yeah, so that's what I thought, because that would also mean that like machinist skills and warrior and whatnot had that removed as well. Yeah, I think that might just be console wikis like updating some elements before the new expansion had come out. So it's just a weird thing looking through the stuff with the Wayback Machine and seeing the way the sites were like updated or structured back then when Final Fantasy XIV was popular, but wasn't quite as popular as it is nowadays. Stone 2 now acquired at level 18 down from 22. It is a good bit stronger. Obviously still just an upgrade over Stone 1. Repose unchanged. Cure 2 buffed up a little bit. Has the free Cure 3 effect. That passive was removed. And also the Lily gauge. 100% chance to proc a Lily. We can't wait to talk about that. Presence of Mind regen. The same Cure 3 acquired 2 levels earlier. I don't remember if the radius was buffed at this point, but you know what, still a little bit better. Actually now exclusive to White Mage, now a job quest reward. This is because Divine Seal was removed. We'll get to that when we talk about role actions, but that is essentially what it replaced. Holy, still the same thing, completely unchanged. Arrow 2, cast time was made instant. So yeah, now Arrow and Arrow. Oh, I think, no, Arrow is now Arrow 2 is now upgraded from Arrow 1, just like we saw with the previous one. That's why it's instant, which means that was a change that also technically happened in Stormblood that the other thing was doing. That's no wonder I felt so surprised. It's like I could have sworn these were Stormblood changes. It was just the console games wiki, like updating some things early, weirdly enough, way back when. Medica 2 unchanged. Benediction now only a 3-minute cooldown. We loved that change because we were still so we didn't need cleric stance anymore, but we still used it pretty much the same way. Like, oh, I'm DPSing. Oh, the tank's low. Benediction. Now I can do it every 3 minutes. Asylum Stone 3, the same. A size, now 60 seconds instead of 90. Arrow 3, recast time reduced to 2.5 seconds, so that's always good. MP cost reduced. Tetra removed, and then we get into the new actions. Thin Air reduces the MP cost of all spells to 0. Man, do I miss this version of Thin Air. Nowadays, it's like you use it and your next spell is free. Back then, it was just, up until Endwalker, actually, it was just, now all your spells are free for a set time. It gave them such good MP management during healing intensive sections. Cure 3 spam, everyone's stacked. You can still do that with 2 Thin Airs now and be pretty good on MP. You know, stopping MP use on 2 Cure 3s is quite good, but nothing compared to Thin Air. Especially you had the really try-hard Cure 3ing with Cure 3 heckin' Presence of Mind. The Speed Demon Cure 3s. You never wanted to do that, but sometimes people did it. Stone 4, you know, just another upgrade. Divine Benison still created the barrier, had a 30-second cooldown, and didn't have any stacks, but can only be executed with at least 1 Lily on your healing gauge. Oh, and all Lilies are lost upon execution. Oh boy. Then we get to talk about that soon. Before we even get to that, Lilies were embarrassingly bad at the start of Stormblood. You know what else was embarrassingly bad? Plenary Indulgence. Now, nowadays, Plenary is just you put it on the party, and when you do AoE healing, you know, you use your lilies in an AoE or maybe cast a Medica too, they get bonus healing. It's great. Back then, it wasn't the case. Back then, restores HP of all nearby party members. Potency varies with current confession stacks. There's a 20% chance that party members are granted a confession each time you heal their HP, drumroll please, via Cure 1 and Cure 2. Remember when I said you never wanted to use those skills? That's true in Stormblood. So Plenary was useless. It was actually a button that, well, if you were playing well, did nothing. And it was on a 15-second cooldown. Like, you could use it a lot. So if you wanted to use it to back up a tank heal, you could if you were spamming Cure 1 or Cure 2 for some reason. Think about that. You needed to do 3 Cure 1 or Cure 2s to get the max potency. What the heck? It was really, really bad. And you'll see when we check the end of Stormblood that it did not stay that way for very long. I don't even think it stayed that way until the raid. Like, I think by the time the raid came out, Plenary was a completely different effect. I think it was the effect we're going to see in the other one. And then, of course, skills that were removed: Cleric Stance, Protect, Asuna, Stone Skin, Shroud of Saints, Divine Seal, and Stone Skin. Yeah. So I think, again, some of those things that we saw on the other page, I think they were representative of not Heavensward. I think they were representative of Stormblood for whatever reason. They just updated some skills early, I guess based on Media Tour or Live Letters stuff. They started updating early. I don't know. But yeah, you know, at this point, they didn't want, oh, I have to cast Protect every time, and when somebody dies, I have to spend the MP to protect again. And Asuna, like every different healer had an Asuna. Why don't we just make it, you know, an action that they share? Cleric Stance, they were all taking it anyway. Might as well just make it a roll action. That's pretty much what most of these removals are. It was taking the things that made White Mage and putting them into roll actions. And that was an identity thing that people really struggled with, because a lot of these things were like the reason you played White Mage, the thing that stood out. And now all of those things were being offered to the other jobs that were already being perceived as stronger than White Mage. Throw in how bad Lilies and Plenary were back then, and you have yourself an absolute storm, an absolute mess at the start of the expansion that nobody was a big fan of. Going down to the roll actions, Cleric Stance, now roll action. However, it just boosted attack magic potency for a little bit. I think they could have kept this version, to be honest, but they ended up doing away with it. Honestly, 5% wasn't a whole lot every 90 seconds, but hey, it was damage. Now, Break is an interesting one. I don't think a lot of people remember how good that was. Unaspected damage with a potency of 50. Now, that's a pathetic potency, but if memory serves, you could use it as, I think it was no MP, or it was like so little MP that you could keep DPS up when you were completely with it. If it was the difference between sitting there and not casting anything and sitting there and casting Break. So yeah, there was that. Now, Protect's still around, unfortunately. It was just a roll action, but I don't know if that survived till the end of Stormblood. I feel like it didn't. I feel like it should have been gone already. Shroud of Saints was removed, so now they had Lucid Dreaming, you know, Enmity by half, refresh, nothing too fancy. Swift Cast, Eye for an Eye, you know, Arcanist did have this thrown over here, but they didn't care so much. Yeah, see? So this is the effect. 20% chance when the barrier is struck, the striker will deal 10% less damage for the next 10 seconds. It was so weird. It's like a 1 in 5 chance of proccing. Some monsters only got like 3, most monsters actually, only got 3 attacks off in that duration. So there's a decent chance they didn't even get it. That's why it's not in the game anymore. Largis, I think is pronounced. This is Divine Seal, just it's a roll action now. Surecast, next spell is cast without interruption, nullifies knockback and drawn effects, duration 10 seconds. I'm almost certain that, well, this also only has a 30-second cooldown. I know Arm's Length had a much longer cooldown. I'm almost certain that you just couldn't cast the spell. And if you cast the spell, then you would lose it and you'd get knocked back and die. That wasn't good. And then Rescue. It was the beginning of some very rough times. Cue Stormblood video of me being rescued to death a million times. Please go look. Anyway, the Stone Mastery traits. Yeah, traits also got a big overhaul at this point. We still had Free Cure for whatever reason. We still had some of the base damage things and the upgrades. But Secrets of the Lily is the real reason we're here. 50 or 100% chance that a Lily is added to your healing gauge upon execution of Cure 1 and Cure 2. Remember when I said those skills were useless? I think you see the problem. And you needed to... Lilies will lower the recast time of Asylum, Assize, Divine Benison, or Tetra by a percentage corresponding to the number of Lilies stacked at the time. So, Not all of those skills required lilies to use, but any of them would consume all the lilies, and they would reduce the cooldown. I think you can see the problem here. The idea of casting 3 Cure 2s to get a Size or Asylum or something like this back faster was not liked. Or you couldn't even use Benison without a lily in the first place. So yeah, it was really bad. I don't think I need to tell you that. Also interesting, Secrets of the Lily 2, 20% chance that Asylum or a Size recast is reduced by 5 seconds upon healing critical HP with Cure 1 or Cure 2. If these crit, basically, you had a 1 in 5 chance. So you not only had to fight with the crit RNG, but you had a 1 in 5 chance of them being... So bad. So bad. Hey, at least the gauge still looks the same as it did back then. Ugh. But we also have the end of Stormblood to look at, and most of this stuff doesn't really change. So we really just need to look at the major stuff, the stuff that we've already been talking about. Let me just scroll through real quick and see, make sure there's not anything else here that I'm forgetting about. Some important stuff. Yeah, Benison didn't require lilies. I don't even think it required lilies by the time patch 4.05 came out, like the Savage tier. Plenary now is only via Medica 2, or Cure 3, so it was actually a great assistance to raid-wide AoEs. This made it a decent skill. And it's still not very exciting as your main capstone level 70 skill, but good, usable, functional, unlike the way it was before. And then going back into the traits, going all the way down to Secrets of the Lily, adds Lily to your healing gauge upon the execution of Cure 1 or Cure 2 while in combat. Well, wait, they left that the same the whole Oh, and they left Secret of the Lily to this. Really? I thought they changed in the middle of the expansion. Mage, they just didn't have a good time for a lot of expansions, huh? This was January 2019. This was the last job update before Shadowbringers. Oh my god, that's depressing. Okay, well, the good news is it can only get better, right? So let's look at Shadowbringers White Mage. All right, here we go. Back to the job guide. We're looking at not too long, like a couple weeks after the launch of Shadowbringers at this point. And they do still have revisions, this time that they are hover-overs at this point. The Lily thing, gone. I mean, that's the big thing. But also the cast time for single target cures being down to 1.5 seconds. This is something I think we still benefit on for the most part. Although what was slower to happen was DPS skills getting that treatment, I recall. Some jobs had it and some jobs didn't back in Shadowbringers. And now it was like this is when they started doing it to healing skills. Fluidor's knockback was removed. It had its range increased, but you're just using it for bind at that point. Popular in Bozja at that point for dealing with the what are they called? For dealing with the NMs. Like if you had an NM chasing you and you wanted to death it, you could bind on top of the sleeps with the repose. It was quite nice. Presence of Mind, still pretty much the same. All this stuff, Cure 2 has the Lily thing removed. Regen was buffed and had its potency buffed, but its duration reduced. So it was more healing over less time. Holy had its cast time reduced to 2.5 seconds. The MP cost was reduced, but its potency was also reduced, but it got its fall off damage removed in Shadowbringers. Arrow 2, just potency buffs. Medica 2, I believe, just potency buffs. They had the same thing done. It had its regen increase, but its duration decrease. So they doubled the potency and halved the time to make it so it was the same amount of healing, but was more concentrated, which I think it was a pretty good change in retrospect. I had forgotten they had done some of this. Asylum via a trait got the HP healing increase, which made it a lot better, especially for big, constant raid-wide AoE stuff. Stone 3 got a potency buff. A Size had the MP restored, nerfed. I forgot that happened. Ugh, I don't think that survived till the end of Shadowbringers. Maybe it did. I don't think it did. Thin Air was acquired had its level acquired lowered to 58. That was cool. Stone 4 potency increased. Divine Benison was changed to a 500 potency shield. As you can see, that didn't survive very long because the max HP barrier was way better. Plenary grants confession to self, and now it is the way it is now. You put it on allies, and then when you cast a heal, it procs an additional cure. So yeah, that's familiar to the way it is now. The skill started transforming. As you can see, I think Arrow 3 is gone by this point. Cleric Stance isn't even a roll action, but you have Dia replacing Arrow, you have Glare replacing Stone, and then we have the Afflatus skills. We had Afflatus Rapture, Afflatus Misery, and Afflatus and Temperance. Where's the other Afflatus? Did we get that at an earlier level? Afflatus Solace now available at level 52, which would nourish the Blood Lily. Everyone loves the Blood Lily. It had its issues in terms of balance until somewhat into, I think it was 6.1 Endwalker, maybe it was before 6.1. But yeah, before, when Misery was, it wasn't worth, spamming your GCD in order to get Misery. You didn't want to just use lilies up until recently just to get Misery, but you could use them during downtime to make sure you had Misery during big burst windows, and everyone loved the way Misery felt. Solace, single target, GCD heal, Rapture, AoE, GCD heal using a lily, and they were great for MP management, great for movement, still are to this day, and I think that's one thing they really got right about White Mage was the lily system, especially now, and it's it's like 20 seconds a lily now. It's insane. Temperance also finally giving them some form of damage mitigation, reduced damage for nearby allies, increased healing potency once every 2 minutes. It was good. I think even back then we didn't feel it was enough. They only had this one thing every 2 minutes, whereas the other healers could like balance tools for different parts of the fight a lot better. And I still think that's kind of a weakness with White Mage now, but it's a little less relevant now than it was back then, unless you're like, you have a very specific, well, actually, since the Sage buffs, like White Mage Sage was kind of toxic in the last ultimate that came out, DSR, because it was very, very strict on mitigation and shielding. With the Sage buff, it actually kind of helped White Mage even, because in that situation, most people would replace the White Mage with a Scholar or an Astro, as opposed to replacing the Sage with a Scholar. It was just the way that a lot of people thought. So that helped actually even the perception of White Mage. But this is still just going back to Shadowbringers. It was the same ideas. It was the same general feeling people had about White Mages. Just not enough mitigation, too much raw throughput. Repose, now a roll action. Asuna, we said that was a roll action. I don't think it has that bonus effect anymore. Now acquired at level 10, Swift Cast, Lucid Dreaming, which doesn't have the Enmity thing anymore, because Enmity really wasn't a thing. Also only a 1 minute cooldown, which was dope. Surecast, spells can be cast without interruption, no longer goes away on the one hit, but it's also only lasts 6 seconds and once every 2 minutes. This is when like Arm's Length and Surecast were pretty much equalized on that front. And Rescue, still the same idea with that. Free Cure still there for whatever reason. Secrets of the Lily, just adding the Lily every 30 seconds now instead of from your single target heals. And other than that, you had the Blood Lily becoming available and Asylum getting the HP added. Now that was the start of the expansion, so obviously it was going to undergo some changes, but it was received much, much better. I believe this is the right tab I have. Was there anything of major significance? I think it was a lot of potency and MP adjustments that we saw on the job more than anything else over the rest of the expansion. Now, this doesn't have changes listed, so I'm trying to eyeball it, but I'm pretty sure that's really the only thing that changed. This still is 5% max MP. Wow, that really was. I guess because of Thin Air and the Lilies, they figured, but I could have swore. I think they did just adjust MP costs for some things. I guess I can check to see, Cure 2. I guess I should look at like Cure 3 and Medica 2 and things like that to see if they did. No, it's still 1500 MP. Still, Medica 2 is 1300 MP. I could have sworn they made some changes to this stuff. 1300 MP. No, a lot of these are the same. Maybe Glare had its potency 400, and let's see. No, there they are. Wow. Okay, I could have swore they had some more MP adjustments. I know Astro had some MP adjustments, but that's not the job we're here to talk about. So, yeah, I mean, they still had Thin Air though. Thin Air and every 60 seconds. Yeah. We also, it's every 60 seconds for Lucid Dreaming as well. So yeah, okay. I just misremembered the MP going back. That's fine. Confession. Still same. Yeah, it looks like pretty much all this is the same. Still 900 potency, Temperance, and just to double check, make sure I clicked the right one. 4/13/2021. Yeah, the White Mage almost didn't change at all in that time. Like, it's actually kind of crazy to think it just didn't change in the slightest. Like, nothing is different here. There might be a potency I missed that's different, but that's like it. I think Holy moly. All right. Well, yeah, White Mage survived that way until Shadowbringers and the Endwalker section. I don't know that we really need the Endwalker section. When is that? Why do I have 2 links for Endwalker? 11/1/2022. Did I really get a from now? No, I just have 2 links that are from November of 2022. That's last month. So, you know, you know, if you click this video, odds are you know how White Mage works in game. If you don't, a lot of those things are the same, in all honesty. Again, some potency adjustments, presence of mind being 2 minutes is another one. You know, Cure 3, obviously, it has a much better, it has had for some time a much better radius. But yeah, all this stuff is pretty standard. I think realistically, the big thing is Aquaveil in Shadowbringers or an Endwalker having that extra damage reduction, 2 stacks of Divine Benison being another thing, Holy 3 being added, Glare 3, Ivy, you gotta chill. You gotta chill a little bit. And Liturgy of the Bell. I think Liturgy actually underwent a couple of changes. I think at the start of Endwalker, it functioned a little bit differently and they made it more healing effective. I think it was like the amount of time it lasted and the healing that it actually provided was changed a little bit. Taking 1 damage will expend 1 stack of Liturgy of the Bell. Yeah, I mean, that's just how it works now. I think some of it might have been the range. I think some of it might have been... maybe it didn't expend the bonus healing at the start of Endwalker. Like if you ran out of stacks, it might have even just been a difference from the Mediator to now. But either way, this is how it works live now. You know, that's the big change is Liturgy of the Bell and having Aquaveil and the extra stacks, the roll actions, you know, not too much else to say. Cleric Stance, remember, was gone in Shadowbringers. You know, we were brought to just these like last few actions, which again is pretty much identical. I don't know how Free Cure keeps surviving every expand. I really don't know. I guess just because it's there and it's not hurting anybody, but Lilies were changed from 30 seconds to 20 seconds during Endwalker, and then, you know, you have the Blood Lily, Enhanced Asylum, the upgrades, the Enhanced Healing Magic buff that they got for all this stuff at 85, and then Benison with the double charges. But yeah, and that's it. That is our retrospective video for White Mage. As you can see, they held true to the identity. The problem is with White Mage, that may have been to a fault, because a lot of times them wanting to stick to White Mage's identity made it irrelevant or hard to enjoy compared to the other options and compared to the content they were releasing. When it was good, and this is true now, when it's good, it's great. That healing throughput is so amazing. But as Astro has gotten more and more insane raid tools, White Mage has more and more been in need of a facelift. It doesn't need to be complex or complicated. It just needs to be not what it is right now. I think it needs to be something a little more than what it is right now. But I'm sure White Mage mains, the few of you that are left, have your own opinions on that matter. But with that, that is going to be a wrap for our White Mage retrospective video from A Realm Reborn to now. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. We will be doing retrospective videos for all the A Realm Reborn and the Heavensward jobs. Probably not going to do the Stormblood jobs. Maybe. We'll see. Shadowbringers and Endwalker jobs for certain we're not doing. But with that, I'll see you in the next video. And until then, take care.